story that you're paying zero attention to, let me take one more look at the housing market. The old former real estate agent, real estate investor, sitting here in the healthiest real estate economy in the fastest growing city in this country, Austin, Texas. Let me see what this economist Robert Shiller has to say from the Daily Ticker. The future of the housing market is, quote, a great unknown. So let's see what Robert Shiller has to say about all of this. Great rescue of the housing market. Okay. And again, like they started off the stock market story, they put all of these indicators that anyone reading the mainstream media, reading all of these indicators, would think that the housing market in this country has recovered. Well, maybe here in Austin, Texas, but let's have a little wake-up call. Along with all this good news are growing concerns that another bubble is forming in the housing market. Feeding those fears is the growing number of all cash purchases for homes, primarily by real estate speculators. They account for at least 27% or more of existing home sales every month over the past year, according to my friends at the National Association of Realtors, which I guess I'm no longer a member of. Okay, the housing market, quote, is becoming more of a speculative asset, says Robert Shiller, co-creator of the S&P Case-Shiller Index. He's a professor of economics and finance at Yale University. He expects the market will advance in the short run, but beyond that, there is a, quote, great unknown. Shiller says there is a lot of speculative excitement in specific housing markets, but he's not convinced so it'll just be left to be seen what all this is gonna play out over the year. Quote, people should not assume that the housing market in this country is off to the races. For the country as a whole, it is unlikely that we will have another boom like the one we recently had, meaning the one in 2007 when I made $113,000 a year enjoying the fruits of the boom we have, because that was such a rare and unusual event, close quote. The last boom was countrywide and financed by excessive leverage, he said. Well, good luck on finding leverage with these tightwad bankers. But I'll put the link onto this. And speaking of tightwad bankers, this will bring me to the fourth, final, and main story that I'm going to read. That is the classic example of these global banksters just tightening the noose a little further. And since I was partying all last week, I have to admit, anything going on in Cyprus, I'm not even sure where the hell Cyprus is. It's some little island off the coast of Greece, for God's sake. That doesn't mean anything to anybody. My guess is less than 1% of this planet could point out Cyprus on a map. I'm not at all sure I could. So apparently last week Cyprus became the latest country over there in Europe to ask for a handout for from these banksters to bail them out. What the mainstream media is calling the bail-in. And the reason this story should be important to you, if you are anybody on this planet who has their money in a bank, good God Almighty, I don't care whether you're in Cyprus or the United States of America, if you have your money in a bank, listen to this story about what these banksters are up to over there in Cyprus, and make no mistake about it, this is their little test case to see if they can get away with this bullshit out there in some little island off the coast of Greece. If they can get away with it there, this model is going planet-wide, guys. And now this has not been finalized. They're just trying to get away with this to see how far they're getting. And this is why I would say half of the stories on today's business and finance page are about this little story. It's not about the Cyprus story itself, which is just one more, it is what the banksters have come up with as how they're going to bail out Cyprus. And I am going to read pretty much this entire story. I will put the link to it on air, but I'm pretty much going to spend the rest of this rant reading this story by Henry Blodgett of the Daily Ticker, titled "Why the Cyprus Bail-In is a Bigger Deal Than You Think." And I have to admit, if it had not been for this story, I probably would not have even mentioned this. Okay, take it away, Henry Blodgett, and thank you for this story. So you can either go on the link and read it yourself, or I'll just sit here and read this story to you. Okay. You can be forgiven for thinking that you don't need to give a hoot about what is going on in Cyprus. After all, it's just some little island somewhere in the Mediterranean. But what is going on in Cyprus could actually matter, not just to the rest of Europe, but to the rest of the world. Here is the short version of what is happening in Cyprus. Okay. And this is the story going on and on, but there's a big twist to this one. Some of Cyprus's banks, like many banks in Europe, are bankrupt. So Cyprus went to the Eurozone to get a bailout the same way that Ireland, Greece, and other European countries have. And the Eurozone powers that be, mainly Germany, gave Cyprus a bailout. And here's the caveat. This has never happened before. Until this week, this is the caveat for the bailout of Cyprus banks. They have insisted that the depositors, the mom and pop depositors in Cyprus banks pay part of the tab. A startling condition that has never before been imposed on any banking system since the start of the global financial crisis in 2008. The deal did not even touch the bondholders. This was for the regular depositors. So why the depositors? These are the folks who had their money in the banks for safekeeping. Safekeeping, guys. Pull your head out of your ass. This is why I took all of my money out of Bank of America in 2008 and put it into physical silver and went out and dug a hole in East Texas. I do have $100 that I keep in my Bank of America account for absolute emergencies. Anyway, getting back to this story. So when Cyprus's banks reopen on Tuesday morning, meaning tomorrow, every depositor will have some of his or her money seized by their bank. The current plan is that small account holders under 100,000 euros will have 6.75% of their funds seized. So what is that? So if you had 10,000, this is euros, but let's call it dollars. If they were pulling this shit in America, this means if you had $10,000 in the bank, that you would have $675 seized. And amounts over 100,000 euros will have 9.9. So if you have $100,000 in the bank, if this was happening in the U.S., you would have $10,000. Well, $9,900 of it seized, taken from you, frozen, is no longer your money. And then, so getting back to Cyprus, and then the Eurozone's emergency lending facility and the International Monetary Fund, these big, shadowy global banksters. At that point, after the money has been seized, then they're going to inject 10 billion euros into the failing banks to allow them to keep operating. Good Lord. So Cyprus's government, and this is so many of these articles, I mean dozens of articles in the mainstream and the alternative media talking about Cyprus's government tried to explain this deal by observing that it was better than the alternative. So the alternative to having your money seized by these evil banksters would be immediate bankruptcy and closure of all of the little banks and the major banks. In that scenario, depositors would lose a lot more of their money. Businesses would go bankrupt, and tens of thousands of people would be instantly thrown out of work. So, you know, guys, there is no way to win this. You're damned if you do, and effed if you don't. You should have gotten your goddamn money out of the bank years ago. Like this dumb hippie now sitting in this chair. Hopefully I'll be back on my rock tomorrow. So, not surprisingly, news that deposits in Cyprus's banks would be seized. Gee, guess what that triggered was an immediate run on the banks. Depositors rushed to ATMs and tried to withdraw their money. But the ATMs were not working. Gee, what a surprise. You know, pounding on the side of that building, give me my money back. They found that the side of the building wasn't working. And now the government has made it impossible to transfer your money out of the country. So, assuming Cyprus's government approves this deal, depositors will have some of their money seized. You know, it's now completely up to the government. And so here's the next level of ripple, is that half of these depositors are not even native, not even residents of Cyprus. Like I have money down in an Ecuadorian bank. And so this is bigger. So half the depositors in Cyprus are not even residents of Cyprus. They're, you know how these people, the half of these deposits